Oftentimes, when we think about Malcolm X's transformation and education, we tend to associate it with his stint in prison from 1946 to 1952. And even in his autobiography, he says that prior to prison, he was pretty much illiterate. But I don't think prison actually transforms anybody. I don't think it's actually useful for a lot of things. I think it was honestly his love of curiosity, his love of learning that actually transformed him, his love of reading that actually transformed him. Because Malcolm actually fought to get his education. He understood it through the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, and he was always engaging in thinking and pushing himself to learn. I would actually argue that Malcolm X's homemade education, as he called it, was extremely important to understand how he needed to learn, how he shared his learnings with the people, and then how it can ultimately inform us about how we're educating Black and brown kids themselves. So I'm saying all of that to kind of preface it to kind of talk more about why is Malcolm X so important when it comes to education. Malcolm X was somebody who was consistently reading and then translating it into common English. And I think that's revolutionary because oftentimes academia and these high level thinkers tend to push Black and brown people out of the narrative. It pushes poor people out of the space. And Malcolm X was able to demonstrate an ability to understand complex ideas, ideologies, policies, and how people could understand that through his different methods of learning. And when people like him do this, that John's dangerous, right? To have someone like him, this showed white America the dangers of having a Black man who could learn and articulate his experiences to the world. This is why we have a banned books list in prison and policies that are directly attacking critical race theory and studies. It doesn't make any sense, but they know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to design a system that doesn't allow our openness of thinking, this idea to challenge these inherent white supremacist systems. They fear that this education will shatter a particular image as Black people start to educate themselves beyond just the classroom. Because Malcolm's learnings was outside of school. It's the reason that freedom schools exist. Black people tell our own stories. There's an art in the oral tradition and the radical tradition. I think Malcolm X also made learning palatable to everybody, and that's what made him extremely dangerous. And I think he did this in a couple of ways. I think one, Malcolm would read and engage in conversation. This is important. You cannot keep this knowledge to yourself. He was someone who wanted to share it with as many people as possible. He would debate in public spaces and like bookstores and parks, which allowed everybody to be in on his learning journey, which I think teachers and educators and even mentors, they can start taking in that because now it becomes more back and forth. And then he would take these conversations and push them into political action. All right, cool. I know all of this stuff now. However, we're going to take it a step further. We're going to push these systems. We're going to push these ideologies that actually don't service Black people. I think when it comes to education, we tend to teach a student, but sometimes fall short of giving them transferable skills that can turn into an opportunity to make the world a better place. I think curriculums need to include hope, cultural identity, emotional learning, understanding that one can create change and movements through developing their own education. We think this one size, one shoe fits all sometimes. And that shit don't work. We know it don't. But I think when we really get to the root of education, we think about the origins of education, the root, it means to draw out. So Malcolm X is always going to remain important to me as an educator because through his homemade education, he was able to draw out what he wanted to see change for Black people and teach us to radically love ourselves. And by doing so, we're able to design a world where we can dismantle white supremacy, patriarchal capitalism, and live in full abundance. What's Malcolm X taught you? Peace.